Hi folks, I hope you're having a great day. Well, recently you may be aware I completed the Pembrokeshire Coastal Path, the whole 186 miles, and apparently climbing the equivalent of Mount Everest. And I completed this in 10 days and 50 minutes. I'll explain the 50 minutes later. So one of the things I've been asked is, could I do a video on kind of summarising all the lessons I learnt and useful information that might help other people to complete the trail. So if you haven't already, I think you will find it useful to watch the series of the 5 videos. It'll put kind of context into some of the things I'm actually talking about. So on that note, I'll get to the start, or maybe the finish. So yeah, there's always that question with a trail about where to start, kind of west to east or north to south, and the direction you're going to follow. Now, on that particular path, you're going either north or south, but you also head inland and out again because of Milford Haven. So when I looked at it, it would appear that the prevailing winds were in a southwesterly direction. So that influenced me in terms of saying, I think I'll go south to north. The other thing was that, and one of the things I always consider for all trails, is where's the kind of biggest impact? What I'm going to enjoy the most. And I'd actually prefer to save that to the end to keep me motivated, to keep me going. And any things I want to overcome, I'd rather get them done and out the way from the start, or as near to the start as possible. And as you'll see from my descriptions later on, that's very much happens more in the south than it does in the north. So that was the other reason. The third reason, and again, something I apply to all trails, is how easy is it to get to what's going to be my start or the finish. I don't want to get to the finish and find I've got like a 5-mile walk to try and get on a train or something. So when I compared the two in terms of the south or the north start, I found that the south was actually 3 miles away from the nearest transport, and that being a train. Whereas the north, and therefore was going to be my finish, once I finished, it was downhill and get on a bus and away I go. So yeah, that was my thinking behind starting in the south of a place called Armouth and finishing in the north. This is one of the things about the route. Not all miles are Instagrammable, not all good. And it certainly made me think about, if I was doing it again, would I do the whole route? Now the problem occurs when you get to West Angle Bay. It's at that point that you start to head inland, because there is a huge bay that is really a kind of shipping lane. It's where they bring in liquid gas. There's an oil terminal, there's a power plant. And so as you head inland, it becomes very industrialized. And I'm not sure it's worth the effort of walking through that particular part. And in fact, from Angle Bay till you get round until Milford Haven is about 28 miles. So if there was any reason you wanted to shorten the route, that would be a reason. And in fact, I met a hiker coming the other way. He was local and he decided to get the bus. And also I had some comment on one of the videos about that particular point, which I will supply in here so you can read that comment and see what other people think. Kind of annoying where it sits in terms of the whole route, because then you start to question, well, should I start later on? Because before you get to Angle Bay, you come across Castlemaine firing range, where there's tanks and other things at practice. From your point of view, it takes you away from the coastal path. And it's a bit of a bind because you end up walking really away from the thing that you've come to witness. And there's a fair bit of road as well. It's not very pleasant. Yeah, it's something to think about. Where would you actually start if you was doing it again? Interestingly, I met 3 Polish people who were completing the hike, and they had started from Milford Haven. And of course, that is quite a bit easier because you can actually get the train to Milford Haven. And so, yeah, they did Milford Haven to the end, going same direction I was, from the south to north. And I can see the logic of that now. And clearly it misses all the industrial parts and the firing ranges. And I think it's probably the best half of the hike. So the 4 questions I get asked the most are relating to really any trail, so it's common to all trails, is how easy is the navigation, what's water supply like, and also camping or wild camping and resupply. So starting with the first one, then in terms of navigation, obviously a coastal path has a certain advantage. You keep the sea, in my instance, going south to north on the left, and of course if it had been coming over the way, it'd have been on the right. And so, yeah, coastal paths are generally a lot easier to navigate. Then if we talk about water supply. Now, again, on coastal paths, it tends to be, I find, generally easier. And the reason for that is that you'll have obviously lots of beaches along the way. And if they're kind of popular beaches, then there will be some commercialization and quite often, therefore, public toilets as well. And also, because you're at a sea route, undoubtedly, streams have to go somewhere and quite often will outlet into the sea. As long as you do your normal check-in of, is it a small stream, fast flowing, then I say you're generally safe to take water from there. I always still filter it, and if I'm using it, quite often I'll use that particular water for cooking, so I'll boil it as well. So yeah, filter and boil, so water's not really an issue. Now, wild camping. Again, I don't know what it is about coastal paths, but wild camping tends not to be a problem, and it certainly wasn't a problem with that particular path. I did use other amenities, which is what I will do. If I'm doing a particular hike and I come across a campsite at the moment I'm thinking about stopping for the night, or YHA, then that's what I will do. And the ones that I used and I would recommend, first of all, I stopped at Marbear YHA, which is 15 miles from the start. So it's a good point to it's a good break at that particular point. And you can camp or you can stop in the YHA itself. Now I actually camped and it was £13, less 10% discount for members, and you don't have to pay for showers. So taking those things into consideration, I think that's a bargain. So certainly I would recommend that place. A place called Porthcallis, I think it was. That was, I think it was £8 a night plus shower charge. Beautiful campsite in a beautiful spot. Enjoyed that one. Then there was Newport campsite at Newport. Great calf alongside it. I think I nearly spent the afternoon there talking to my Polish companions, I have to say. And it was £10 and then plus charges for shower. And then right at the end, I was going to stop. I was going to finish and then stop in the actual Cardigan, is it? Anyhow, I'm going to stop in the finish town, and I couldn't find anywhere. So I ended up stopping in the YHA at Poppet Sands, which is 2 miles from the finish. And I would recommend that. That made things very easy. Stop there the night, 2 miles to the finish, then a mile down into the town and catch the bus. And so I had the whole day then to travel back. And those 2 miles took me 50 minutes. So yeah, I can recommend that. At the time I booked, and it was kind of a bit last minute, it was 39 quid. And there was 2 bunk beds in the room. So between the two of you, obviously, Not much at all, and 10% discount if you remember. So yeah, they're the places I stayed where I didn't wild camp. But some of the wild camping spots, oh, they were absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, I'm sure you've seen my videos, you'll appreciate how good they were. So then the last question is resupply. Yeah, I mean, again, not really a struggle, mainly for the reason I said before about commercialization of beaches and, yeah, the odd random pub here, there, and everywhere. And, yeah, coming to relatively small places, but because they had beaches there, they sold all the essentials. And so I never really struggled at all in terms of resupply. So from that point of view, and for all of those reasons, I think I found that true of most coastal paths, they're kind of a good one to start if you're new to hiking. Okay, what's next? Now, whilst I've spoken about all the attributes of coastal path walking that makes it a good place to start, I think, from a hiking experience, there's definitely one element that sometimes causes concern, and that is chasing the tide, as I call it. Yeah, so you have to plan accordingly to make sure you're not going to be caught out by the tide in certain places. And on the Pembrokeshire Coastal Path, there are two such places. One is called Sandyhaven, I think, and also Gan Estuary. And they're relatively close, which is helpful. I think it's probably about 3 miles between the two. The first one, Sandyhaven, is 4 miles to the west of Milford Haven. So if you were starting at Milford Haven, or when you get to Milford Haven, that's a good time to kind of work out, well, how long is it going to take me to do the next 4 hours? Is it worth rushing, or should I spend the next half day chilling in Milford Haven? It's a great place to wait if you have to wait for the tide to go down at Sandyhaven. And there's advice all around in guidebooks and what have you. And I think a lot of the tide tables are advertised as well. But not surprisingly, you can get an app, of course, that can do that. And the one I used was Tide UK. So simply, you would look there and it would tell you what time is high tide, which is obviously what you're trying to avoid, and low tide, which is of course the one you're trying to catch. Once you get to one kind of gets to the point where it's low enough, then you should have enough time to get to the next part. So in my instance, that was Gan Estuary. So yeah, but don't let that put you off. Don't let the tides put you off. You can actually walk around them. There are detours if the tide's actually in, but you're going to end up walking on the road and stuff. And I think it was more fun just chilling. And in fact, watching other people, some of the locals coming across when it hadn't gone down completely. What is my conclusions about the trail? Well, you probably guessed by now. Would I do it again? That is the acid test. And I think it's a kind of partial yes. So Milford Haven is probably where I would start. I sort of enjoyed the other bits, and I think you'd probably be missing about 50 miles or so, maybe more. Yeah, it was just too much of a faff, and although Tenby was great and some of the other bits, but I think, the other thing is, of course, if you do start at Milford Haven, you do miss out Dobby's grave. So I guess if you're a Harry Potter fan, you might want to do that. But other than that, I think I would start from Milford Haven. And from a wild camping point of view, and all the other things, the resupply, etc., they're not a problem at all. So I hope you found that useful. And obviously, any questions or you think there's anything I particularly missed, then please drop us a line, give us a comment. I'll probably want to do more of these going forward. So any ways of improving them or including more information, I'd gladly take on board. So with that, thanks for your time, and hopefully I'll see you on the trails one day.